Good afternoon. Welcome to this month's installment of Creation Justice Webinars, the monthly program that puts faith into action for the sake of our common home. I am Brooks Barron. I'm the Environmental Justice Minister for the United Church of Christ. As always, I am joined by Birmingham, Alabama's melodious trumpet for justice, the Reverend Michael Malcolm, who serves as the Executive Director for Alabama Interfaith Power and Light and the People's Justice Council. Michael, I am a fan of our focus for today because I think it hits close to the root of a number of problems we face today. To confront the climate crisis, we need large-scale government action, and that's hard to achieve if those responsible for the crisis are pulling the strings and pushing the levers behind the scenes. It is just a moral catastrophe of immense proportions. What are your thoughts as we get started today, Michael?
Well, first and foremost, Brooks, let me say I am excited about this topic. I am excited about this panel, and I believe that we will have some concrete actions that we can take leaving from this discussion. While I was thinking about this particular topic and thinking about the state of where we are, I remember a poem that I learned when I was in seminary, and it's by William Blake, and it goes, it's The Sick Rose, and it goes, "O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night and the hollowing storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his sick secret love does thy life destroy." There's a scripture reading that says, "Whoever claims to love God yet hates a brother or sister is a liar. For whoever does not love their brother and sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not yet seen." The Bible tells us that a hypocrite is someone who puts on a mask and pretends to be something they are not. And while there have been many appeals for our democracy to become a more inclusive democracy, we've allowed for a sick worm to come in, and the love of money and the love of profit has placed itself over that which is a love for people and a love for planet. And we are now challenged with calling forth this moral call to be more inclusive in our democracy, to also include the least of these, those who are under-resourced and underserved, not just our human family, but those of our non-human family as well. In other words, we're now being called to be more inclusive in our creation care, to include all of creation. And to do that, we need a whole of society approach, not just a whole of government, but a whole of society approach. And we've got to deal with that sick worm, and we've got to call that sick worm out, which is putting profit over planet and people. I look forward to talking through this pollution and democracy and hearing what these experts have to say. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Michael. As always, your remarks, I'm sure, undoubtedly inspire many a sermon. I see sick worm in the many sermons this upcoming Sunday. Let me now introduce our three panelists for today in the order that they'll be speaking. First up, we will have Sarah Briner, who is the Director of Research and Strategy for Open Secrets. Open Secrets website provides the most comprehensive resource available anywhere for tracking campaign contributions and collecting lobbying data and analysis. Previously, Sarah was Open Secrets lobbying and revolving door researcher. Prior to joining Open Secrets, Sarah was a doctoral student at Ohio State University. Maybe I should say the Ohio State University, where her dissertation was entitled "Politicians Behaving Badly, the Determinants and Outcomes of Political Scandal in Post-Watergate America." Not too many dissertation titles make me want to read them, but that's a good one. So thank you for welcome Sarah today. And then after Sarah, we will have Tyson Slocum, who is the director of Public Citizens Energy Program, covering the regulation of petroleum, natural gas, and power markets. Tyson presents his research in congressional testimony and appears regularly in the media, including CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. He is a member of the faculty at the University of Maryland Honors College, where he teaches energy and climate policy. He additionally serves on the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission's Energy and Environmental Markets Advisory Committee. And then finally today, we will have R.L. Miller, who is the political director of Climate Hawks Vote and the president of Climate Hawks Vote Political Action. The vision of Climate Hawks Vote is for local, state, and national levels of government to put into place bold, progressive policies to combat the climate crisis. They work to identify, train, and elect climate hawks, elected officials who are aggressive and progressive champions for climate justice. RL's past work has included exposing the politics of climate denial, opposing fracking for oil in California, and training others to advocate for legislation. It's an honor to have each of our distinguished panelists here today. Sarah, please get us started.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this panel. I'm excited to hear from Tyson and RL, and I'm excited to share some of our resources available to the community that might help people with their activism and own research. So with that, I will be sharing my screen. Okay. And presenting my show. For those of you who may not be familiar with Open Secrets, we are a federal, well, we used to be a organization focused on federal money and politics, everything from campaign donations to lobbying to dark money. This past year, we've actually merged with another organization called the National Institute on Money and Politics. The focus is on state and local contributions. While that information isn't currently reflected on opensecrets.org, we are rolling out sort of more integrated state, federal, local data over the next year. So I wanted to give a small amount of background as to kind of the ways that fossil fuel money can reach your members of Congress. It's not as simple as making a donation directly to a member of Congress. That used to be the primary way that you would sort of track money. But in the post-Citizens United world that we live in, it's actually much more common and much more sort of regular to see money targeting politicians in ways that far surpass the amounts donated directly by companies and their employees. So when we're talking about direct donations, we're talking about this sort of limited, I'm writing a check to a member of Congress. Some of you may have done this. That money right now is limited to $2,800 an election or $5,600 a cycle. And that money is disclosed to the Federal Election Commission. You can do that to the candidate. You can do it from your company's or ideological group's political action committee, and it's sort of direct and traceable. The other side of this, and really the money that is starting to make up more and more of what we see in political spending, is this indirect or secretive money. And these are donations to super PACs, and donations from or to 501c4 nonprofit organizations. Donations to super PACs are large donations, unlimited in size, that are disclosed to the Federal Election Commission. But the main element here is that those super PACs are not allowed to directly coordinate with political candidates. That was the Supreme Court's way of saying we're drawing a line between this money from a company and money to a candidate. That money is disclosed. It gets a little bit shady sometimes, but you can see it on Open Secrets and also at the Federal Election Commission. The other kind of money that is not disclosed is donations to and from 501c4 nonprofits. These groups are allowed to engage in a limited amount of political activity, but there's no disclosure whatsoever. They file with the IRS, and the IRS is not required, nor has any political appetite to disclose that kind of spending. On Open Secrets, you can see, and I'm going to share on at the end a slide with links to this information, but I wanted to not navigate through the website today. You can see information of all of these kinds of money, including some of the nonprofit spending that I talked about. This graph on the left shows the top contributors to members of Congress and political groups in 2021 and 2022 so far. This includes donations directly from the companies that we've identified as oil and gas companies, as well as donations from employees of their companies. So we have this information for oil and gas, as well as other energy interests, and then really any kind of political interest at all. We classify all donations by the sort of industry in which they fall. So you can see so far this cycle, it's not a ton of money, $484,000. I mean, that's a ton of money to me, but not to democracy. But you can see already Koch Industries, Samson Energy, ExxonMobil, primarily donating to Republicans as indicated by the red, but there are some significant donations to Democrats and liberal groups as indicated by the blue. These numbers will get a lot larger as the cycle progresses. Citizens United allowed for companies to make donations directly to super PACs. That was one big element of the Supreme Court decision. That hasn't actually been capitalized on by very many groups, with the exception of groups in the fossil fuel industry. So you can see here on this table that some of these companies, Koch, again, Chevron, and it goes on, RAI Services, these are all, well, actually that might be tobacco, but a lot of these are energy companies, and they're donating directly to, in this case, conservative leaning super PACs that run advertisements supporting and opposing candidates. We also have places on the site where you can specifically see how much money has targeted members of Congress. Again, I'll share these links. When you look at all of the money that we track in Open Secrets, you can see the top 20 members of all times getting money from oil and gas. Obviously presidential candidates are going to be on here because they raise a lot more money, but you can see sort of this list of high profile Republicans. And I recommend kind of digging into all of the various channels available to you through the website to kind of see and get at the ways that money is influencing and targeting through political donations your representatives. We have information on everyone, in every race being run. You can check and see who's giving money and who's getting money. And I think that can be really valuable. We also have the ability for you to look at a specific committee. This little graphic right at the bottom, industry, oil and gas, is the amount of money going from oil and gas companies to the members of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And you can see sort of the amount going on average to each member of ENC, and then the amount, how that compares to the amount going to all members of the House. So oil and gas is sort of over targeting members of the committee that regulates them. We also provide for the ability to research a specific company. I'm showing here a snapshot of one of our organization profiles for ExxonMobil. That allows you to see how much money they gave in a cycle, how much money they spent on lobbying, which I'll talk about at the end of this, and how much money they spent themselves targeting members of Congress. So it's a really, really super useful tool if you're targeting or interested in a specific company. We have these for about 40,000 companies. I'm going to run a political advertisement for you guys just to show you what this kind of non-direct spending looks like. We all know what a check to a member of Congress looks like. We know what a check to a political party looks like. But in my home state of Alaska, there was a ballot initiative in the last cycle that would have taxed oil and gas and fossil fuel companies, and not surprisingly, a lot of sort of oil interests opposed that. It actually ended up failing, and I want to run a political ad for y'all that shows what this kind of spending looks like. And I will point out that Alaska has robust disclosure requirements, which I'll speak about in a second. So I will play this for you.
Yeah, sure. You know the pipeline, but do you know it like this? This is where the magic happens. Alaska depends on the pipeline system to deliver resources to communities. It's like the lifeblood pumping artery for the state. It's not just metal and oil, it's the people. The people who belong to unions, who have families, Alaskans who love to live here. We are not oil and gas producers. We are the Alaskans who happen to have jobs in oil and gas. Right now, kids from around the state are training so they can have the same opportunities. Ballot Measure 1 will destroy jobs for Alaskans now and down the line for them. Our greatest resource isn't in the ground. It's our people, and Ballot Measure 1 puts all that at risk. Ballot Measure 1 is just too extreme. Vote no on one to keep Alaskans employed and secure our future.
Paid for by We Are Alaska, Rebecca Logan Chair, approve this message. The sole contributor of We Are Alaska is the Alaska Support Industry Alliance, Anchorage, Alaska.
Okay, so the interesting thing about that advertisement, aside from, well, a lot of things are interesting about it, but is that in Alaska, they're required to disclose the top contributors to any group running a political ad. If you go to that group, the Alaska Industry Alliance or whatever it was, let me see if I have that link. I do. If you go to that page, this is a nonprofit, and you can see they don't have to disclose anything about them, but you can see some of the featured members of the nonprofit, including Halliburton, and then other sort of tangential to oil and gas, Northern Energy Services. So you can see sort of who's funding this advertisement that looks like it is sort of an innocuous, non-political organization. So I just think that that's a really key way that a lot of money is entering the system from fossil fuel companies in a way that makes it very difficult to track and understand what's going on. I always run over on time for presentations like this, and I'm going to be very cautious of that today. So I'm not going to go too much into lobbying, but we have a huge lobbying section on open secrets that can allow you to see exactly what is being lobbied by companies. Oil and gas is a huge presence in federal lobbying, and probably, I think, 6th or so ranked in terms of industries. And you can see the specific issues and bills that they're targeting. You can't see any information about the recipient of the lobbying activity, like the member, which is unfortunate, but that's just not disclosed on the forums. So I really urge you to look at that. It also gives you a sense of who these lobbyists are, where they used to work, and in many cases, who they used to work for. Lots of lobbyists used to work for members of Congress and federal committees. I'll toss this whole slide deck in the chat so people can dig around, but I've included links to some of the images that I shared in this final page, and I'll share my email as well in case anyone has follow-up questions after the presentation. So that is my portion of this. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and we'll now turn things over to Tyson.
Brooks, thank you so much. And Sarah, thanks so much for that awesome overview. OpenSecrets.org is the go-to resource to find out who is influencing our political system. It's an easy-to-use website. And speaking on behalf of everybody I know, thank you, Sarah, for all of the incredible public interest work that your organization does to find out who's trying to pull the strings in our democracy. So I'm Tyson Slocum. I direct the energy program here at Public Citizen in Washington, D.C. And what I want to speak very briefly about is, why is the oil and gas and fossil fuel industry so influential, right? All of the scientists are telling us that we need to move off of fossil fuels. Polls consistently show that the American people understand that they know that we need to act on climate, and that we have to rely upon renewable energy. And when I look at energy markets in the United States, renewable energy isn't just the moral feel-good choice, it is also the least cost option in energy markets. You cite a large wind or photovoltaic solar system in your community or in your state, it is typically going to be able to produce electricity cheaper than a coal-fired or natural gas-fired power plant. You look at the rise of electric vehicles. A company like Tesla is now valued more than traditional automakers because markets understand that the future of transportation is electrification. So if we know all of this, if the facts show that cleaner technology and clean energy is the right way to go, why is our political system still mired in debate about whether or not to move off of fossil fuels? And the thing that we need to understand is that the fossil fuel industry is incredibly powerful because they have a massive current and historic presence in our country. Many Americans forget that no other country on earth produces more oil every day. No other country on earth produces more natural gas every day than the United States. We are the second largest coal producer next to China. So when you put all this together, no other country on earth produces more fossil fuels every day. And this isn't a new phenomenon. We've been doing this for 100 years or more. And so what the oil and fossil fuel industries have are generations of accumulated political and economic capital. And they have a vested self-interest in maintaining their control over our fuel systems for as long as they can to squeeze every last penny of profit out of their capital infrastructure. So when they are lobbying and advocating, right, they are lobbying and advocating to prolong their financial self-interest for as long as possible, no matter what the impact is on working families or on the climate. And what we're seeing is renewable energy is serving as what we call a disruptive force, right? It is seeking to disrupt these entrenched interests. And, you know, society is punctuated with social and economic change triggered by such disruptive forces throughout human history. And the question and the challenge is, are the incumbent industries going to embrace and welcome these disruptive challenges, build them into their business models to become clean tech sustainable operations, or are they going to use their generations of accumulated financial and economic capital to erect artificial barriers from their friends in Congress and regulators to try and delay the involvement of clean energy into our systems? And so this is the debate we're having. And what Sarah outlined is just how much fossil fuel money is funneled into our political system. And all you have to do is look at the numbers, right? The US produces 12 million barrels of oil every single day. Oil is trading at about $70, $72 a barrel. So that's $865 million a day that they're making. So times 365 days out of the year, that's $320 billion in revenue that the oil industry is getting just from producing oil within the United States. And they've been doing that for generations. That is an enormous amount of cash, and it is in their self-interest to try and maximize and lengthen their control over our system. And so what the key has to be for us to transition off of fossil fuels is first just recognizing that the alternatives are not just cleaner, are not just zero emission, but they are the economically just thing to do. That we can competitively transition off of fossil fuels into renewable energy in ways that will save consumers money and build resilience within our communities that continue to be impacted by the ill health effects of our fossil fuel addiction. And so, you know, there's a number of legislative fights that have been going on this year, from the infrastructure bill to the Build Back Better spending bill, where we saw opportunities here to establish, for example, a federal clean electricity standard that was beaten back essentially by Senator Manchin, who is the largest fossil fuel recipient, the largest recipient of fossil fuel money in Congress today. And so we have to take our democracy back by challenging the undue influence of the fossil fuel industry. And there are some great pieces of legislation out there that I really urge folks to throw their support behind. And one is the Freedom to Vote Act. This recently underwent a filibuster in the Senate, but there are opportunities to move this legislation. It is essential, the Freedom to Vote Act, in terms of doing a number of things, from limiting or stopping the ability of states to suppress voting, which is one of the biggest threats to our democracy. Because the one thing that the oil and fossil fuel industries don't have is the people behind them, right? We saw this slick ad that Sarah showed us. It's true that the oil and gas industry employs people, but not as many as the industries that are negatively affected by the oil and gas industry. And the oil and gas industry does not pay for all of the accumulated health harms that are inflicted upon our communities. And so we've got the numbers, and we need to be able to have access to the polls. And the Freedom to Vote Act not just would help ensure that states can't enact these restrictive or discriminatory restrictions on folks being able to vote, but it also includes some campaign finance reforms to introduce some needed transparency into some of these dark money groups that Sarah mentioned, and ensuring that all folks that want to be able to register to vote will be able to do so. And then on a similar front, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which regulates publicly traded companies, we need to make sure that full disclosure of all political spending by publicly traded companies from Exxon on down, so that we have a much clearer idea about the ways that they're infiltrating our political system. So we've got the support of people across the country. We just need to continue to mobilize, to open our democracy up, to make sure that everyone who needs to be able to vote can, and we need to take the steps necessary to limit the political and economic influence of the fossil fuel industry. I'm hopeful and optimistic that we can get this done. It's just going to take the collected action of all the folks on this call to help us out. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to RL's presentation and to the questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyson, for those very succinct and easy to understand explanations of what's happening and what can be done. We now turn things over to RL.
Hey folks, thanks so much for inviting me, especially Rev Malcolm, you rock. So I'm a DNC member, and before that I was the chair of the California Democratic Party's Environmental Caucus. I run a group called Climate Hawks Vote, and we've all been frustrated over the fossil fuel money in politics. And in early 2017, I started talking with people at the national level about what we could possibly do to try to get fossil fuel money out of politics. A friend of mine over at Oil Change International, which is an awesome organization, said he's been trying for 12 years, but nobody would sign a pledge to that effect. Meantime, there was a group of activists in Virginia where Dominion Energy just has a stranglehold on the state politics in that state. And Activate Virginia was moderately successful in getting a few people to sign on to a anti-Dominion Energy pledge. The wording of the pledge was lengthy and people had to take a lot of time to read it, and that was one of the drawbacks. But I said, guys, I got this. So what I did was I took we came up with a simple, easy to read one sentence pledge. And I printed it up on a foam core board. And I chaired the state Dem Party's environmental caucus. So we were having our big meeting with 300 activists at the state party convention. And we typically, candidates come into the room and pander to us, for lack of a better way of putting it. They go to the Chicano Latino caucus and they say, se puede, vote for me, give me money. And then they go to the environmental caucus and they say, I hugged a tree yesterday, namaste, give me money, vote for me. And I got sort of fed up with it. And so I decided to take some action. And what I did was, as I say, I printed up the words of the pledge on a foam core board. And I told politicians that if you want to speak to my caucus, you need to sign this pledge. And they were at first sort of, how dare you? But most of them did. And this is an example of the pledge. This one has the signature of Gavin Newsom, who is the California governor who just beat back a recall. And this is what the pledge looks like. The big one behind me has been signed by Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and all sorts of random people. And the pledge went national from there. And I ended up writing a toolkit on how to get candidates to sign the pledge. And it's real simple. And there's a lot of different things that you could do. So rather than talk about the theory, which both Sarah and Tyson have been awesome on, I just want to talk about the nuts and bolts, which is ask people. You can ask them by email. You can ask them one-on-one. You can ask them at a debate. You can ask them at a friendly event. You can deliver a bunch of petitions to them and ask them nicely. Kirsten Gillibrand signed the pledge after acknowledging that she had gotten thousands of tweets asking her to sign the pledge when she was running for president. Elizabeth Warren, same thing, 20,000 tweets asking her to sign the no fossil fuel money pledge. And so we've ended up making quite a bit of difference. The pledge has now been signed by 3,400 and something politicians at every level, including every presidential candidate from 2020, Joe Biden. Kamala Harris signed the pledge with me, which I'm particularly proud of because I'm a Californian. Pete Buttigieg, they all signed it. And I saw the pledge as sort of a way of bridging the gap between people who say that all money in politics is evil and all money in politics must be scrubbed and we must go to 100% public finance, and the rest of the world that sort of went, nah. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong. I believe that public financing is ultimately the way to go, but people have been trying to get that done for years. And all that happens is that Congress passes laws with loopholes and lobbyists figure out ways to get around the loopholes. And if they try to close the loopholes, then another 5 loopholes sprout up. And so the idea of public financing is a lovely idea, but hasn't, I don't see it happening real soon. And in the meantime, we have the no fossil fuel money pledge. And it has spawned imitators. I've given some consulting over to a no cop money in California pledge that is pushed by Black Lives Matter groups. There is a health insurance version floating around, patient protection or something like that. I've given them a little bit of consults. I've talked to people at local levels who've tried to set this up for real estate developers. And one of the secrets that we have is Oil Change International in particular defines the list of who is a fossil fuel company. And so it's not just, we don't like you, so we're putting you on the list of banned companies. It's that an objective entity has determined that you are a fossil fuel company. And this is pretty obvious when it comes to people like the Koch brothers and Exxon, but some of the utilities, when they're making all these pledges to be fueled mostly by renewables, you have to have somebody smart who can dig through their filings and find out if they're really a renewable utility or if they're actually a fossil fuel utility. In California, because I get this one asked this one a lot by Californians. Pacific Gas and Electric is oddly enough not counted as a fossil fuel company because California's regulators have made them purchase so much solar power that by now they're less than 50% fossil fueled. Southern California Edison and SoCal and San Diego Gas and Electric are, on the other hand, considered fossil fuel companies. Another question that I get asked all the time is why $200? If you look at the pledge, it says, I pledge not to take contributions over $200. And people say, why $200? Why not zero? And there's two real concrete answers for that. And the first one is that the FEC does not track what is called small dollar money. So all the $27 that Bernie Sanders brought in, the $27 checks at a time, those are not tracked by the FEC. So we cannot track that. So just plain practical. The other thing is that the people in the oil industry are not happy in their jobs. Many of them, there was a poll showing that 56% of them want to leave their current jobs and get into the renewables. They want to get out of their work. And so if you've got a frat buddy by the name of Eddie Exxon working in the oil fields, Eddie should be able to give you $25 for your candidate barbecue. If you've got a friend named Eliza Exxon who runs the Exxon gas station down the street, she should be able to give you $50 while she plots how she can get Tesla superchargers installed at her gas station. It's really the money coming in from both the fossil fuel industry and the top level, the Rex Tillersons of the world that we're trying to stop. And so the no fossil fuel money pledge is something that candidates can and have signed, and you can and should ask candidates to sign. And so it's a real concrete way of trying to clean up our polluted democracy. And folk, I apologize. I've got a furniture delivery coming at some point in this hour, and it was not a good turn of events. I thought they weren't going to be here until after 11, but if I have to dart off camera, that's why. So I will turn it back over to Brooks or Rev or who's ever moderating.
Thank you, Ariel. I'll ask the first question. Listen, let me say to Tyson, you've taken all the questions and answered them, so we don't have a whole lot we can ask now.
I'm sorry. Was I being too efficient?
No,
others can answer as well. I'm sorry.
Well, let me throw out one that I've often heard in our circles, and I'll bring it out now. Especially it comes from those who would lobby for fossil fuels and lobby against renewables. What about the scale up that is needed and the harm that it would cause? How do we deal with that and scaling up with renewables for that initial harm that it'll cause and the initial rise in emissions and whatnot? Is it and how do you deal with that argument?
What's the argument exactly? That
it would be more harmful for us to scale up renewables than for us to stay with the system that we're in.
Yeah, that's not accurate at all. I mean, any sort of sudden unplanned change can cause some repercussions, especially in something as sensitive and important as energy. But if you're replacing a coal-fired power plant or a natural gas power plant that has been belching pollution and emissions into the surrounding community, if you're replacing that with a zero emission power source, that is a huge net benefit for society. And engineers understand perfectly well how to bring online large scale renewable energy that the thing about renewable energy is that it's variable or intermittent in nature. That simply means that typically a renewable energy project like wind or solar, it doesn't produce a steady flow of electricity 24 hours a day the way that a traditional coal or natural gas power plant. And so often critics say, well, the more renewables we have online, the less reliable our system becomes. And that's not accurate. You know, if you do no planning at all, yes, you're going to have problems. But the engineers and all of the problem solvers have looked at this and said, there's easy ways to balance off the variability and intermittency of generation, either by having different geographically located systems, or the big thing is balancing out the variability or intermittency with energy storage, right? And what we're seeing is right now, energy storage is beginning to become cost compatible in most energy markets. And the cost curves are only declining. And so that's the really exciting thing that's going on right now. I mean, when you look at Tesla, it's more an energy storage company than a transportation company, right? Where they're excelling is understanding to the American public and to the global audience that storing energy in a high performance vehicle is not just efficient and cost effective, but also fun as heck. And we're going to see the same thing in the electricity system. And so all of these, any sort of new disruptive change, whether we're talking about the transition from typewriters to computers, from landline phones to cell phones, it includes disruption. But as long as that disruption is managed, as long as you've got equity goals in place to make sure that all elements of our society can enjoy the fruits of these technologies, then it is going to have massive benefits for our climate, for our community health, and for the affordability of critical resources like energy. I hope that addresses your question, sir.
Now, Tyson, I knew exactly what to ask to get you good and fired up. And you use fun, but I like using sexy. I just think that whole thing is just simply sexy. And we need to run to it real quick. But you know what I don't think is sexy is mentioned. And the whole root of fossil fuel in our democracy. And so, RL, speaking on that and really looking at the no fossil fuel pledge, how do we really and truly, moving forward, root out those different bad actors, such as a Manchin, who doesn't buy into the sexiness of us being progressive and being inclusive of all?
So, putting on my Climate Hawks Vote hat, what we're about is building political power for the climate movement. And what that means in plain English is that we try to elect people who will be fierce on climate. We go into primaries. We just endorsed Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin to take on Ron Johnson, because Ron Johnson is the guy who says climate change is bullshit. And Barnes has signed the no fossil fuel money pledge, which is something that I look at when I endorse candidates. Manchin is a problem, but the way that I fix Manchin is by making him irrelevant. He is relevant right now only because he is the most conservative senator on the majority side. And we need all 50 of them. If we have 51 votes, he becomes window dressing. He's nice to have, but his vote is not essential. And the way that we get to him is not by getting at him, because honestly, I don't think any other Democrat could be elected in West Virginia for a long time. I think it's a wonderful state, and things are happening at the grassroots, but it's going to take a while to work itself up. The way that we fix him is by fixing Kristen Sinema in Arizona. She is likely going to face a primary in 2024. Ruben Gallego's name gets mentioned a lot. And he was an early signer of the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge and an early Climate Hawks Vote endorsee when I was first getting set up in 2014 and 2016. So that's how you fix Mansion. And it's not an immediate answer, but it's going to take a little bit of time. But everything in our democracy takes too much time. By the way, I'm going to throw in a fun fact. Right now, the entire state of California is running on 41% renewable electricity and 29% natural gas. And my lights are not flickering. My internet is not unstable. My dogs are barking, but I can't help that. And so that's for all the people who say that we cannot transition, that a transition is going to be abrupt. I say, come to California on windy spring days. Right now it's December. You know, we got cloud cover in many parts of the state. We might even have rain. Please, please, please send us rain. But right now we are running on well over 40% electricity, renewable electricity, and in sunny spring days, it will hit 70, 80, maybe even 90%. So that better world is right here around the corner. All we need is the political will.
Yeah, I've got a question that may be a question for Sarah. The Intercept had some good coverage this past year of the race between Nina Turner and Shontel Brown and some of the contributions in that race. And I know living in that district, that ended up really being in some ways a very decisive in that race, not so much because of the money, but because of the conversation around it. And it didn't work out well for Nina Turner. So my question has to do with the money from what would normally be considered fossil fuel interests went through the Democratic majority for Israel's super PAC. And, you know, so then when Nina Turner criticized that, she was then attacked as being anti-Semitic. Yeah, and we could spend a whole webinar unpacking that, right? But that was really decisive on the grassroots level. That was something people were talking about, you know, and so that, you know, and so it's like to me, are you able to track that and label that as a fossil fuel contribution, or does that become, you know, like a you know, a wall to hide behind, you know, like, and I realize there's a lot to discuss there, but I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I know that RL mentioned the Oil Change International list of oil and gas and fossil fuel companies. We've contributed to their work on that, because we additionally do company identification. That's a huge portion of what my staff does. And there are daily questions, multiple times a day, where we come across typically a nonprofit or a super PAC with a name like you just described. And so in some cases, it's really tricky to deal with that, because they could fall into multiple different kinds of industries. Are they ideologically focused? Are they industry focused? What we try to do is to look at the source of funding for groups. And one of my colleagues, Anna Masolia, and I'm going to drop another link in the chat. Anna is fantastic at using IRS 990 forms to get to the root of a group's funding. That data is so hard to work with on purpose, but you can see through it who serves on the board of specific nonprofits, even political ones. So I'm going to drop that link here. The other place I like to, but I will say that, to your point, this kind of obfuscation is in and of itself a political tactic. And so, of course, given that this is totally legal, you can set up a group called Americans That Hate Puppies and have them support, you know, Kamala Harris and make it seem like she hates puppies. That's totally within the bounds of what's legal according to the Supreme Court and Federal Election Commission, even if that group is funded by, you know, Pfizer. And so what we try to do is make sure that those manipulation tactics are not allowed to be sort of the main story here. One key place that we do this is with our data on Facebook's political advertisements. If you were to go back in 2020 and look at some of the groups running political ads supporting then President Trump, you would see groups like Black Americans for Trump or Women Black Americans for Trump. They weren't grassroots organizations. Those were just arms of the Trump campaign run by white people. And so we, through the Facebook disclosures, we can categorize that as Trump spending, not as like grassroots activists supporting Trump. And we do that for all Facebook political advertisements in the political ad section of the site. It's just hard to get that information to the consumer of the political ad when it's consumed, because people believe what they see on television for reasons that confound me. And sort of getting to, I think, legal restrictions on misleading disinformation need to be a priority going into future elections, personally.
There was a question in the chat, Brooks, for you and I, but I want to actually ask this to all the panelists as well, and just open it up for all of us. As faith leaders and as particularly us as clergy, those who speak regularly to congregations, how do we use this information to share in our sharing with congregations? And Brooks, like I said, feel free to answer that as well, because that's all of us.
Well, something I'll just throw out for conversation is I'm curious if there's some potential collaboration amongst us here. That faith communities, we've got people in every district, and that can go and take public actions at the offices of their members of Congress to bring these things together to light. And so part of my curiosity is is there a kind of a press release time of the year for Open Secrets or Public Citizen where you're making an announcement and we can round up some faith community folks that on that day will visit their elected officials, maybe with a check that is from dirty money or dirty oil gives you, this amount, just be a fake check to mansion of $500,000, or something like that, so that we're able to just give some grassroots presence in different districts. Just some brainstorming, but I think faith communities definitely could do something, and it's up to us to get organized and do that.
Well, just to sort of briefly answer Reverend Malcolm's question, I think that my primary purpose is to make sure that people are not swayed by the powerful interests that are trying to sway them. And we're a nonpartisan organization and a nonprofit, very much so a nonprofit. But you can, I think that it's really important to not let people walk all over our political information. And so, yeah, I love the idea of using this information that we work so hard on by activists to try to make change on issues that they care about. And we'd certainly be happy to help in whatever way that we can. And I love this community for being, so diverse. And I'm just reading all of the clergy, the communities that you all come from. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. So we'd be happy to help in whatever way we can. But Tyson probably has more specific, concrete ideas.
No, that was great. Other than let's keep these communication channels open. This has been a great introduction for me into the work that you're doing, the community that you have, and that's exciting to have new opportunities to expand our collective networks to share what we're doing and how we can support each other's priorities and each other's communities. So I'm just honored and thrilled to be a part of this conversation, and would really love to continue this conversation on indefinitely through our work. So this has just been really rewarding for me. So thank you.
Yeah, the No Fossil Fuel Money Pledge is a coalition. We all are stronger when we all work together. Folk, I've dropped my contact info in the chat. I'd encourage you to sign up for emails at climatehawksvote.com. And yes, it's a political org. But yes, we also do some advocacy work around Build Back Better all the time. No Fossil Fuel Money does not have an email list, but you can follow it, No Fossil Money on Twitter. I will drop that also in the chat. And please, again, we're all better when we're stronger together. Feel free to check out the toolkit at the top of that website at No Fossil Fuel Money. It needs a little bit of updating. There's a couple of references in there to 2018, but we're going to work on that. And then we're also going to reactivate our little tool where you can easily tweet at people once the congressional lines get redrawn. Everything's a mess right now. Everything's a mess right now. That's just a way of concluding.
Well, it's all right. Well, hold me accountable, because I would like to see what I can do to get at least one organization part of that coalition. Well, tell us what we can do to sign up, and we'd like to do what I think. One final thing I just would like to kind of get thoughts on. To me, it seems like this is an issue that does, in a way, have some, cross the political spectrum appeal in a way, because most people do not like that. I don't think like the idea that their elected officials are kind of being bought off by somebody else, right? I mean, that's not really like a Democrat issue, or or a Republican. It's I think like across the political spectrum, it seems like that has some salience. Am I right on that, or what do you think? See some nodding of the heads. All right. Well, I think that's a good message in our faith communities. That this is an issue that a lot of people across the spectrum can get behind. I think that's definitely promising for us. So, Michael, do you have some final thoughts and words as we wrap things up? And as always, we're going to have a post-webinar session, action section led by the Reverend Roberta Rominger, who's got some online actions for us, and just to kind of further the things that RL has talked about.
Again, I want to say thank you to the panelists for your input and your presentations. I hope that everyone was able to grab something that they are able to use moving forward and to help support as we deal with the sicknesses in our democracy. And those factors that cause those sicknesses as well. That is our job as communities of faith. That is our job as faith leaders, to call those things forth and to bring healing to those things. And we're right now at a place where we're desperately needed. So please stick around for those that can stick around and see what actions we can take next. Again, thank you, Tyson, Sarah, and RL.
All right. Thank you, everyone.